Turn this on. Look at it. Look at this. Look at what we have today. I have the best job in the world here. Look, I have a TV studio in my home, and we have from LumaFusion, Luma-Touch, Terry Morgan and Chris Damaris. You couldn't ask. I can't ask for better guests. I just can't. You're the top of the line.
We love to have a chance to chat with you.
I bet you say that to all your guests.
No, all my guests, of course, are important, but you guys have been on for how many? This is like fourth, fifth, sixth time. Although the last time, we did NAB. I was at NAB, and we got an interview there. But the last time on Final Cut TV Live was last June, 1 year ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's absolutely time to get you back on here. We got a lot of comments already. Let me get these put up there. Where is that? I'm going to put them up in the center, right in there. Still at work, busy news editor. This just came by to say that even with the recent release of Final Cut Pro for iPad, I'm still using LumaFusion. While Final Cut Pro has some neat features, it's still short of LumaFusion. We're going to talk about that somewhat because well, it is a version 1 app, but let's talk about LumaFusion first. Let's talk about LumaFusion, and then we'll get into Final Cut for the iPad. Because we've talked about that before on the show. Absolutely. Must have been a year ago I asked you about it, but let me see what else. What's up, everyone? From Matthew, and what else does he say?
Oh, wonderful.
Oh,
yeah.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't have Multicam yet, but I do have everything else, but I have been watching the videos. So let's talk about Multicam Studio first, since that's the biggest, newest thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have redesigned the whole interaction for multicam editing to make it so that you can actually focus on your media and on your cutting when you're ready to cut. So we put a lot of effort into making sure you can set up your synchronization and your audio mapping and your color correction and all that right when you're syncing, so that when you're cutting, you're just in the zone and cutting away to what you see. It's almost like being there live at that point, but you get all the right results. So that's one difference.
But it's a separate app.
Well, it's built. It's effectively a separate app, but it is built into LumaFusion, and it's tightly integrated where it feels completely a part of it. It's very easy to use. We've added some wonderful things like our container clip concept that basically groups together a set of multicam cuts so that you don't have to think about, these are individual cuts. You can recut. You can it's very non-destructive. But it is a separate purchase within LumaFusion. As always with us, it's a one-time purchase, not a subscription. It's I believe $20, $19.99.
Wait a minute. Let's stop right there a second. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. It may be just psychological, but I would much rather buy something one-time purchase than have a subscription. And people say, it's Final Cut for iPad's only $4.99. Yeah. What about Logic? Okay, now I'm up to $10 a month. What about Motion? What about Compressor? Where in the heck are they? I still have to go back. Well, anyway, thank you. I'd much rather do a one-time purchase than a subscription.
Yeah, we feel that subscriptions make sense in some other areas. For example, content. We have a subscription available for story blocks. The nice thing about that is we've always built our subscriptions carefully. Even story blocks, you could get a subscription for a month, get the content you need for a project, and then stop your subscription. You won't lose the content that you already have, and that's key to this, is that you don't lose something. That
is exactly correct, Chris. Yeah. Absolutely. I have some subscriptions. This software that we're broadcasting on, Ecamm Live, but they have a service which they're broadcasting from here. We're going to Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube on their servers. Okay, every time I go live, it's on their servers now. So I don't mind for that. It's a couple other places, but it's exactly correct. It doesn't stop working if you stop paying the subscription. That's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key to all of it. So yep. That's definitely our message.
Yeah, I've always felt that subscriptions should be for consumables, and I don't feel like the creative process is is something that should be blocked once your subscription runs out. Right?
Exactly. So here's the thing. As a consumer, as an editor, I would much rather pay for a major update when it's come rather than pay for it's this constant irritating drip of subscriptions. Over here, this thing, subscription here, over here, everywhere subscription. I'd much rather pay for a major update than have that subscription. I don't care if it's the same amount of money. It doesn't make a difference. It's psychological.
You get to choose.
It's psychological, but also editing isn't something most people do every day. So say you don't edit 1 month, do you want that bad feeling? Oh, I paid that $4.99, but I didn't edit. So that makes editing like a bad thing. I don't want that. I want it to be all positive, happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all about the experience.
That's one of the reasons that I continue to use LumaFusion. I started, when we've been talking for over the years, and I'm using it on my iPhone, and I really absolutely enjoy it. I go to my iPhone before I go to my iPad. It's 2 reasons. Number one, I have a very modern 1 terabyte hard drive, iPhone 14 Pro Max. My iPad is an iPad Air from 2 or 3 generations ago. So I get better performance, but I absolutely love editing with LumaFusion on my iPhone. I did it at NAB. One of the pain points about these things, and I'll be getting the next one, I'll be getting the 15 when it comes out, 'cause this is one of my main cameras, is getting media off of this thing.
Right.
And it's at this point, it's the Lightning connector or it's AirDrop, and neither one of them are optimal. So I said, I'm going to film on this and edit on this. And it worked so well. It worked really, really well.
Yeah, if you can get used to the interface of the iPhone, I love the iPad, but I do have
too.
my iPhone set up, so my shooting iPhone separate from my personal iPhone, so that I shoot on that, and it goes to a different Apple ID, and my iPad is connected to that Apple ID, so I never have to transfer any media, and I can still edit on my iPad. That's how I manage that.
Okay. That's good. It's interesting. I'll have to look into that. One thing I'd like to see is the ability to cut and delete the sync clips without having to press the selected clip twice. I have to select Multicam, consider that, and then clip I want to delete.
Yeah. That interaction, to be honest, was difficult to design.
Yeah, it was we went back and forth on that. And, I think there are certainly opportunities to have other ways to do that, both with, keyboard shortcuts or possibly a new gesture to immediately select into an individual clip. And we'll certainly think that through, and we appreciate that feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the things, Final Cut for the iPad came out. Okay, everybody knows, it's been a big buzz thing all week long. And I looked at it and I watched the videos. I have 2 sites up dedicated to that. I have a Facebook group that I started so the people don't come in to my regular Facebook group, Final Cut group, with iPad questions. I wanted to keep those 2 separate. So I made a separate Final Cut for iPad Facebook group. But I also put up, as I normally do on fcpx.tv, I have a master list of all the different tutorials, Final Cut for iPad. And I'm watching the tutorials, and there's a couple of major reasons why I will not get Final Cut on the iPad. Number one, and we talked about this before on one of the other things, it does not have a scrolling timeline. That playhead still scrolls off the screen and out of view. I call it the Where's Waldo playhead. It's where's the playhead?
Yeah.
I was astounded.
You can't see your preview when you pick up a clip and drag it. There's no, how are you supposed to tell where to drop it? So
I was astounded in 2023 that they still have the Where's Waldo playhead and not a scrolling timeline.
Yeah.
I was. Go ahead.
It was interesting because when there's a lot to like in FCP, and it's a good version 1. But I personally was most surprised by performance, and it was related to that. The fact that they're not, we've had a scrolling timeline, which takes a lot of processor power to scroll, all those clips along. And yet, when I did a test with 6 4K video clips on LumaFusion and on Final Cut on an M1, you put 6 4K clips on Final Cut, it'll start to really degrade playback performance within about 5 seconds. It starts stuttering, and even when you're playing back less than 5 tracks, that time cursor doesn't move smoothly. The time code doesn't update smoothly, and I was honestly surprised by that, because when I've talked to Apple people, I said, we're not doing anything particularly unique here. We're just staying out of AV Foundation's way so that it can do its job. And, our UI is just carefully crafted to do it. And I was a little surprised that, that Apple had some of those performance hitches, and, they're doing a lot and trying to get a new version out. So I'm sure that'll improve, dramatically over time. But, that was one of my big surprises going into it.
I was flabbergasted. Because when I talked to you prior, I talked about the scrolling timeline, and you said, well, you have to have a scrolling timeline on an iPad. You have to. Otherwise, it does with Final Cut, it just disappears.
It disappears, and if your finger gets close to the edge of an iPad, it obviously stops working, right? Like when you go off the iPad, you're done. Well, it's different than a mouse. It's just a different experience. So,
well,
I mean, one of the other things we did a few years ago is add the timeline navigator under the preview that gives you a nice, picture of your entire timeline, so that it makes it really easy to get to a certain place in your timeline, even though you can't see it all. And, frankly, we were inspired to do that by, what Apple had on the touch bar, from a few years back. And I was surprised that they went with the dial on the side. I think that dial works great for nudging clips, but it doesn't work really great for, quickly skimming through your timeline and finding a place. So it's interesting to see the choices that were made there.
On our navigator, you can pick up a clip at the beginning of a long timeline and tap the end of the navigator, and still holding the clip, jump to the end and drop the clip. So it's a multi-touch situation. It really works nice.
No, I love that overview timeline in the viewer. I absolutely love that. The interesting thing is Soundtrack Pro had that back in the days. It had one of those. Okay. And I've been after, one of my suggestions for regular Final Cut is to have some kind of an overview. Like you said, it was on the MacBook Pro from 2016, which I had, the touch bar, and it was there, and you guys had it in the viewer, and it's a fantastic, fantastic feature. Now, we all know,
And Liquid, like when we were working on Liquid, Chris, way back, there was a timeline navigator at the top of the timeline, which spanned the timeline. I like that one too. But
right, actually, DaVinci Resolve does that too. So that's one thing they did nicely, is have that on the top of their timeline. Yeah.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
It says no slipper slide in Final Cut Pro, J and L cuts. What's staying with the Champ LumaFusion?
I will say that Final Cut Pro does have J&L cuts. You can there's a mode, and it's a little hard to find. That's one of the things I found in this, is that you definitely have to read the documentation for Final Cut to figure some of these things out. But you can separate the audio, still keep it in sync, and do J&L cuts. That is a feature. We have a big page here internally at LumaTouch to say what we liked and didn't like about FCP in comparison to ours. Because there's going to be things we like. I'll tell you, my top like in there was their little dial control for setting values, of effects. I love that compared to a slider, and I'm sure we'll be inspired by that in the future. But most of the things we saw, I do think LumaFusion just does more intuitively and does with less requirement to figure out how to do it. Particularly things like keyframing and stuff like that. And that actually goes back to the time cursor that you said. Losing your place on the time cursor was something I did so often when I was trying to keyframe something, that I suddenly realized I wasn't looking at what I was keyframing in the preview because the time cursor had gotten to somewhere else. And that just drove me a little insane, where LumaFusion has always been about being able to focus on what you're working on right now. And I think it makes it easier to understand.
Oh, he said, Matthew says, I'd be interested to know why they make you use M1. Seems like what Final Cut Pro does on an iPad, I can do in LumaFusion on my 2018.
Yeah, it's a good question, honestly. And I think it was a decision to make sure that, that they had the most performance that they could. Some of the things they're doing in there might require, it's honestly a good question. I think they're just trying to control it and make sure that their first release is in a more controlled environment on devices, but I don't know for sure.
Well, but the thing is, I agree with that because that's the second reason why I won't be getting Final Cut on the iPad. I'm not going to get an iPad just to run Final Cut when I have it on my MacBook Pro. And it's more powerful on the MacBook. It absolutely is more powerful. Apple themselves say that multiple times. You want to do advanced color correction. If you want to do, really fast editing, you do it on the MacBook Pro. But I'm using LumaFusion on, I don't know, it's a 3-year-old iPad Air.
Yeah.
iPad Air. And my phone.
Right.
And my phone.
And one of the things, another surprise to me, we made sure that LumaFusion can work in whether you're portrait or landscape and takes advantage of those, layouts and gives you multiple layouts that you can use depending on how you're working. But additionally, on the iPad, one of the key things they added a few years ago was the multitasking. And so, you can put LumaFusion in a split screen and drag things from photos directly to it. And that's a really, or let's say drag text from, for a title, for example. And, with FCP, they don't currently allow that. And I think, again, there's a trade-off where you have control over the user interface so that, but, it was a trade-off they had to make. And it just comes from the fact, some of these things come from the fact that we've been working on this for a lot more years. We started LumaFusion creating it in 2013 when a lot of this wasn't capable. So we had to make decisions based on that have driven how we've built the app. And I think, have been to its advantage in the long run.
Did you just say 2013?
Yeah, we released in 2016, but we started working on it in 2013.
So that's 10 years.
10 years. Yeah.
And LumaFusion started as a touch
Yes.
interface. It wasn't ported over from the desktop and tried to cram it into an iPad version. So
that's I think a key element of what makes LumaFusion unique is that we didn't have to have any legacy requirements or expectations that we had to meet, and that makes a difference in how it feels.
So we have a question: is audio scrubbing coming?
Yes, one way or another, it's coming. I'm actually, honestly, I'm hoping this because they have it in, FCP. I'm hoping we see something at WWDC that makes it easy for us to do that as part of, the frameworks available. But even if they don't, we are definitely working on that. And we have our top audio engineers, basically working on updating our audio engine to allow for that and to allow it possibly in a better way than you've seen it in other apps, as we always do. Try to make it a little better.
You're right. Another question we have: audio zoom in and out to more than 1/25th of a second. Something finer.
Yeah. First of all, if you set your project to 50 frames per second or 60 frames per second, you can zoom in a little finer right now.
Okay.
But
That's a good
I get
tip.
what they're saying. But it's more about audio, and I think we have some things in the background that we're thinking about to make the kind of adjustments you want to do in audio where you can zoom in to get exactly what you want. And I, again, don't have any data on anything like that, but it is something we're aware of and we're thinking about.
And another suggestion: what about writing like they can with the iPad with the pen on the screen?
Let you talk about that, Terri.
Yeah, I mean, we've been wanting to do that. Well, that if we have a feature list, our backlog, and that's probably number 10 on that feature list of things
Is
I
that
wanted.
right?
Yeah. But there's just, for me, it's always been about storytelling. And so all the features that make it possible to tell a really nice story in a really fun way came first. But oddly enough, right before Final Cut came out, that was something we were talking about. And so we've already been investigating that.
Oh, right. Because I can do it with my Ecamm software with an iPad and a green screen. You can somehow, but the problem is I have to look at the screen. I have to kind of guess because I'm drawing on the iPad, and I can do it. I've done it before. But to actually do it on the screen,
So one of the thing I like to do is export 15 frames per second from LumaFusion into Procreate, and then I can hand draw over Procreate and then put that back in LumaFusion and layer it over my video. That's super fun to do. And you can either do a live drawing in Procreate over green screen, or you could do an animation. So it's possible, if you just get into, okay, I'm on an iPad. What are the things I can do? How can I be creative with this device and all the apps that are available? And so, yeah, I'm actually just starting a series. It'll be coming out, the first episode next week, on all the different things that you can do to be creative on an iPad with not just LumaFusion, but surrounding apps as well.
Well, one of the things, people even do this with Final Cut. If they get mad about something, I'm going to drop Final Cut and just start using DaVinci Resolve. Well, it's not a zero-sum game, okay? You can use both LumaFusion and Final Cut on the iPad. And if you want to, I haven't tried DaVinci Resolve on the iPad. It won't run on my iPad. That's funny. Only LumaFusion runs on my iPad. You guys are the only ones that run my iPad. But you don't have to drop one to use another one. You can use both. Absolutely,
as long as
use
you're
both.
not paying a subscription, you
Well,
can
that's
get,
true. That's true.
And that's in my series, I'm not using subscriptions, period. So even as far as, I'm just using the basic iCloud account. So I'm going to plug in my USB-C drive with a terabyte of storage to put my media on. So that's another thing that you can do with LumaFusion that you can't do in version 1 of Final Cut, external storage.
So last time you were on, Chris, you mentioned something that they did that allowed you to edit right from the external SSD, something to do with the Thunderbolt connection, or...
Yeah, I mean, they just sped up the bandwidth there. And so, it was a funny story at NAB. Terri said, we're going to be demoing, having 3 SSD drives hooked up through an OWC, GoDock. Yeah. And it works great. And I didn't actually believe her that would work, that there was enough throughput to do that. And I'm like, okay, you'll have to show that. And it worked beautifully. We had media on 3 separate drives, all being edited in LumaFusion at the same time and all playing back smoothly. It was unbelievable. And so the technology is there. Apple's done an amazing job, making all this possible. So again, what our job has always been is, how can we best use that, to make it easy for, for our editors to tell their stories and work the way they want to work. So, being able to grab a SSD drive that's just been captured off a Blackmagic camera, plug it in and start editing without having to bring in the media is a big deal. And it's what LumaFusion allows. And I think your point about being able to use different tools for different purposes is extremely important. It isn't a zero-sum game. And, if all you want to do is color correction, then you might want to look at DaVinci Resolve because it's got the best color correction.
Yes, hands down.
And when you want to, tell a good story with video editing, I think LumaFusion's the best tool right now out there, and we will keep working to continue to make it that. So it's a lot of fun. And like Terri said, you can use other apps to complement that and really get the best of each tool to do what you want.
Sure. And even go from Final Cut on the desktop to Final Cut on the iPad. Well, you can't go that direction.
No,
you're going to go
the other way. Yeah, and you can go from LumaFusion to Final Cut on the desktop.
And
as
there's reasons, because Final Cut on the iPad, on the desktop is just has more things than the iPad version. It has more horsepower, and the Mac has more horsepower. It's like stabilization.
I don't know that you want an iPad app that has deep menus and too many options. I mean, you might want that, but it won't be fun for storytelling.
Sure.
It would be a complex situation on a single pane of glass that has to be touchable. And that's, I think, what we're seeing with some of these other apps that are coming out, is that they basically are taking that desktop experience and trying to shove it onto the iPad, whereas we've really rethought every single feature. How can I be able to know what this, what the timeline does, what the icons do, how can I get around the app in the most fun way without a bunch of deep menus and options. And I think that's one of the things that makes LumaFusion so much fun, is not having too much.
No, but I was amazed. I'm amazed that when you use the iPhone version, everything is there.
Yep.
There's no features that are lost from the iPad version. You have to know where they are. That's all.
Yeah, that was a immense amount of time that we spend making sure that happens. Often, as we get near to the end of a towards a release, half our bugs are from, some of our QA engineers basically saying on the iPhone SE, this button is cut off or this, so then we're figuring out how can we make that fit? What can we do to make that? So there's a lot of time and effort spent to make that happen on every iPhone that's available.
I remember one time Chris told me to stop designing on the iPad, design on the iPhone. I'm like, are you mad? So it's difficult.
We had a great time at NAB. I interviewed you up in the new West Wing. I didn't go there last year. I never got there, but I specifically went up there at the BEA area, the educational area. And one of the things, I don't know how you did this. I think you were just playing a video. In beta, you were playing back 16 tracks of 4K on an M2 iPad Pro. 16 tracks of 4K on an M2 iPad Pro. That's in beta.
That was
it's
a
not
live
out.
demo. That was a
live demo. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was just doing it. We've had internally, the ability to turn on, more tracks, and with the M1, it didn't have enough bus bandwidth where when you get beyond 6 tracks, even though the CPU and GPU were capable, it just didn't have enough bandwidth to allow all that 4K media to go across the bus. But with the M2, they changed that, and so we have smooth playback of 16 tracks. That'll be coming in sometime in the future to everybody. We're trying to decide how to handle that on the lower end devices, so that we can either make it available or limit it in a way that, doesn't limit people, and still have that available. So we're still investigating that and still testing out all the scenarios there, but it's pretty amazing. And again, that credit goes to Apple. They have done an amazing job.
Absolutely.
Both optimizing software and hardware. And so again, it's just our job to stay out of the way and make sure our app, does the best with what they've provided us. And that's what we work on.
No, are you excited about WWDC?
We are. I'm very interested to see, obviously the, Reality Pro headset or whatever it's going to be I'm a little skeptical, I'll admit, as to, how that's going to fit. But Apple has always surprised me in the past with having a good vision of whatever hardware they're going to come out. And hopefully we'll see that vision and go, okay, this makes sense to us. And in fact, one of the things I was saying to Terry this morning is I wouldn't be surprised if the release of Final Cut for iPad has some connection to that in content creation for whatever that is. That might be one piece for having sooner. I don't know. That's just my guess, but I'm also hoping to see some really nice improvements in AV Foundation based on what I've seen in Final Cut Pro that we can take advantage of in LumaFusion, including the audio scrubbing, as I mentioned before, being able to reverse without rendering, and a couple of others. The cinematic mode editing, the focus editing on cinematic mode, I'd love to see available to third-party developers. So we're hoping.
Oh, I didn't realize that wasn't available to third party. You mean the access to the tools for the...
Yeah, there's no tools for that. It's a black box, and we've talked about it. It's and so I hope they'll make that available to us since it's available in Final Cut. But we'll see. That may be don't know, never know.
So we have a question from Matthew. Says, where can we offer suggestions or feedback?
Oh yeah, we take all sorts of suggestions from all sorts of places, but like the official one would be to go to our support people who log all questions, feedback, everything, and you can get to that on our website or let's see, support@luma-touch.com.
So one of the things that I tell people, and look, I'm a big Final Cut Pro advocate. Okay, I always have been. But when I'm comparing Final Cut on the iPad, it's only version 1, I understand, to LumaFusion, there's many things. There's a lot of things, but I'm just going to go over one at a time as we brief, each subject comes up. I invited Apple to come on, talk about Final Cut and the iPad, but they're not here. And I invited you on, and you are here. You are very, very approachable. You are very connected to your audience and suggestions, and you have roadmaps. You talk about things like you just talked about the roadmap of having more than just 6 tracks going forward on certain iPads. So that's one of the other things. Yeah, you listen to your customers.
Yeah. Every Wednesday, we have a meeting called our backlog grooming. And that's where the team gets together and they bring up new either bugs or ideas that customers have come to. So our support people, our social media specialists, they've all written up things that they've heard that week that customers are interested in. And if it's an already existing one, it gets a bump up in its tag, to say, hey, more people are asking for this, and that helps us prioritize things. But every one of those ideas goes into our backlog. If it's even if it's wild but vaguely possible, we will put it on the backlog and keep track of it and decide, hey, is this something we could do, and is it something that that a wider range of customers might like, and so we consider everything that customers present to us, because we think that's the way we're going to be successful in the long run, is by we can't do what Apple does, so we have to be different, and we're going to be different by continuing with our customers. And we can't always do it fast, particularly Multicam was a big development effort. And I know customers have been asking for other things, very consistently for a long time. And those are in the works. We can tell you that those are high priorities for us. Multicam was a big effort for us to get done. And so having the first version of that out gives us a little freedom now to say, okay, now we can really look at those ones that people have been asking for a long time.
So I've talked to you in the past about the Mac version of LumaFusion, because you allow LumaFusion to be opened up on an Apple Silicon Mac. But one of the things I noticed on your website is you actually have, on one of the captions, you say the iPad and the Mac on one of your tutorial videos. Has that been prioritized at a higher level recently?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think that we do want that experience to keep growing, so that it is a really nice hybrid between the touch LumaFusion and what you want on a desktop. But we want to still keep the LumaFusion experience, which is storytelling first, having fun, telling your story, and that sort of thing. And so, yeah.
We focused on, making sure that, on a desktop device, that the interactions feel good, and we're continuing to work on that. Yes, you can use it on your M1 Mac Mini, by the way. And it's a good experience there. It's one we're continually evolving, and we want to make it, the best experience on both devices. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, and it works well there.
Absolutely. So I like I said, I enjoy it on my iPhone, and I never thought I would. I thought the iPad's where I'm going to use it, but I find myself using the iPhone. Well, that was a couple of reasons. Number one is I have a 1 terabyte drive, and this is the iPhone 14 Pro Max, the top of the line. So it's more powerful than my older iPad Air. But it's amazing what you can do on a phone. That's one of the other things about the LumaFusion. You can use it on an iPhone. You can use it on the Mac. You can also use it on Chromebooks, and you have an Android version now, which, in light of the fact that Final Cut's come to the iPad, was probably a very, very smart move.
Well, yeah, I hope it is a smart move. I think it has been pretty good so far. And at NAB, we did the BEA exhibit, which is for educators. And there's just a lot of interest in having a tool where students can focus on what they're really trying to learn about, which is how to tell an effective story and how to, share your media in the relevant places without having to spend, 3 hours lecturing on different codecs and things like that LumaFusion just handles for you. So I think the Chromebook is going to be great.
Yeah, yes. We've worked, our Android and Chrome OS development team has worked really hard, and it's very quickly, coming up to speed. We had to set we're going to do it based on our 2.4 version initially, and now they've already brought it up very close to our 3.2 version, and we're moving forward where in the future it'll, have parity. Some features will take longer to bring over, like Multicam, just because of the wide range of performance on different, Android and Chrome OS devices. But, we're making headway on that. And I think, as we move forward, that's going to get better and better, and we're really excited about that as well.
So you mentioned education. So are the Chromebooks kind of a standard in education? Do they give those? They are.
Yeah. Most school districts, Google made a very big push on that, to bring Chromebooks into the school to make them cost effective and easy to set up is probably one of the biggest parts of it. Is they're so easy to reset and set up for students and control that I think that's a big factor in that. And so, the difficulty is they do have a wide range of performance, but we're working closely with Google on this to really get the best result we can. And we will have one of the nice things is Google is really pushing hard into the educational ecosystem and making it easy for schools to buy large numbers of an app and control how those are put across to different students' devices. And so we're working with them to make sure we'll have a special version of LumaFusion specifically for education that'll be priced differently and licensed specifically for educational systems as well.
Well, that's fantastic. That's really fantastic because I remember years ago, Apple used to be really involved with education, but then they had, I don't know what happened. They fired everybody in that department and it just disappeared. I know they're trying to make a somewhat of a comeback now, but that's really great educational pricing.
Yeah, we will be at ISTE, which is the educational trade show coming up in, when is that? End of June?
End of June, yeah. We'll be at Google's booth for some demonstrations there for education there. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I think that's one of the reasons that Apple finally did Final Cut on the iPad, although I have to question the timing of this, okay? 2 weeks after NAB, they couldn't do it before NAB, and 2 weeks before WWDC.
Yeah.
It's like we don't want to do it for NAB, and we don't want to do it at WWDC. So I'm very curious as to why they didn't want to target either one of those. WWDC's too booked up. That makes sense. But why not do something right before NAB to create some buzz? Because it's not only we're not only talking about Final Cut on the iPad, they were talking about Final Cut in general. And, there was nothing at NAB about Final Cut. I was searching for it everywhere. There's zero. So we speculated on that quite a bit, whether it was not ready at that point and they just, Apple doesn't do anything until they're ready, or if there is some specific marketing reason that they did this in between, and it'll be interesting to see if that plays out, at WWDC, if we see that connection or not. Yeah. Well, the WWDC, 2 years ago, they said they're going to transition all their machines to Intel, and they've done every one but the Mac Pro.
Oh, yeah, to the Silicon.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the only one. A year ago, March 2022, when they brought out the Mac Studio, they said we have one more Mac to make the transition. But that is not happening. It's not going to happen today. So here it is a year and 3 months later, and they still haven't got that. It's got to be at WWDC. They got to at least preview it. Preview it.
Yeah, there'll be some disappointment if they don't, I think. So everything I've heard is it's going to be a very jam-packed, keynote at WWDC. So we'll see. Hopefully there'll be a lot of exciting stuff and fun things to see.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, but then there's also now reports that there's more Macs coming out. I don't know if because the Mac Studio at this point is 15, 16 months old. Maybe they'll update that processor. That's also on the M1.
Right.
It's on the M1 Ultra, whatever the heck it is. But last year, WWDC, they introduced the M2. This year, they could preview an M3, or they could just have the M2 Ultra, whatever they're going to do. But if they don't do the Mac Pro, they're going to have to. I mean, I'm very confident they are. Because they've always previewed the Mac Pro at WWDC for the last 15 years. Even the Power Mac PC, it previewed it. And then the original cheese grater, they previewed it. The update to the cheese grater, they previewed it. The cylinder, when Phil Schiller says, "Can innovate my ass," that famous thing, that I didn't want one of those. I never bought into that whole architecture. And of course, they came back to, we made a mistake. Very rare for Apple to do that, right? To make it public, we made a mistake, okay? Backed ourselves into a thermal corner, whatever the heck the excuse was. But then they came out with the 2019 Mac Pro, which I bought and I used for 2 years until I got my MacBook Pro. I just sold it recently and I got half price for it. And I was thrilled. I sold it
great.
locally, and I got half what I paid for it. So that's fine, because now that money is put in an envelope for my M3 MacBook Pro. It's put away for when I get the M3 version. Because my M1 Max is doing fantastic. It's just really, really, really good. I'm very, very pleased with it.
Yeah, the performance is great, for sure.
So we have a couple more comments. Too bad I didn't come here since the beginning. I would love to know more about it. Well, stick around. You will do that. Do you have beta testers or a program for this?
Yes, we do. And if you contact support again, you could ask about that and be put in line for that. We have a nice coordinated beta program as we come to new releases. And we love to get we often like to get some new people in at each release because, it gets some fresh eyes on things. And usually new beta testers are very willing at first to give a lot of feedback. Sometimes over time that tapers off a bit. So yeah. We love to
Right. Yeah, beta testings work. I mean, the few times that I've been involved, it's work. You just don't get the software and let it sit there.
Yeah,
You'd never be asked back again.
Yeah, and you're often
But
getting
our
it when
beta-
it's a little rough. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and our beta testers have really tight access to our whole team through Slack. So you're if you want a daily conversation with us, so it's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Matthew again says, how does Final Cut Pro Export handle the multicam in LumaFusion?
Right. At the moment, we're flattening it when it goes out. So it'll basically turn each cut into a simple clip. We will be working for a future update to actually export the full multicam, container and the multicam cuts so that it shows up true multicam in Final Cut, but that'll be a little ways down the road.
And we are going to give Matthew a copy of LumaFusion. If you don't have it, Matthew, if you have it already, let me know. But you've asked so many good questions on this live stream, you're going to get a copy of LumaFusion. You have to contact me after the show. I'm not going to stop the show now. Contact me after the show on YouTube or Twitter or whatever, and we'll get you a copy of LumaFusion. Thanks to the folks at LumaFusion, luma-touch.com. So we have another comment here. So want to prove LumaFusion is the boss as a TV news video editing app. Just the one feature request. So far, nothing. Audio zooms, please. Was driving home. Yes, they talked about that already, Justine. That's something on their roadmap. Once again, they talk about their roadmap.
Yeah, thanks.
Right?
Thanks for the feedback on that, and that lets us know that that's important for that workflow.
Oh, Matthew says he already has it. Give it to someone who needs it. Okay. Then we'll put it back in the.
Do you have the Final Cut Pro? The Final Cut export?
Yeah, the FCP export.
Could also do that.
Okay, well, Matthew, you got to win something here.
Or multicam. Yeah.
Or the multicam. If you don't have multicam or the Final Cut Pro export, since you're so generous in kicking it back in, if you don't have one of those two, they've agreed to give you one of those two instead.
Yeah.
So let us know. So what else do we have here? So Mac version. Oh, the SSD situation. You said you connected to 3 SSDs at NAB, and they were all working through the OWC.
Yeah, they were. We had layered clips, and those were all playing back, simultaneously from multiple drives, and it's really good. And our integration in LumaFusion for external drives is really straightforward. It's part of our linked folders source, and so you simply select a linked folder. You get the standard Apple selector to select which drive or folder on that drive that you want to link to, so you can organize it how you want, and then it just accesses media from that. Now, you have a choice in LumaFusion too under settings where you can either edit directly from the drive and not bring anything into the device, or if you're concerned about it and have a large amount of storage on your device and would prefer to have it on device, you can change that setting so that when you drag a clip to the timeline, we automatically copy it from the drive into LumaFusion so that it's secure there, and you can then disconnect your drive and still have the media available. So you can work how you want, and we give you both choices. Either way, it's just happens automatically when you drag a clip to the timeline.
So Matthew says he doesn't have FCP export, so we'll get him a copy of that. There you go, Matthew.
There we go.
Yeah, actually, we did a multicam edit from the external drives connected.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
really well. Yeah.
Now, is OWC the only ones that do that with iPads
No,
at
they
this
just happen
point?
to have a really good dock, and so I mean, you'd have to test it per dock to find out if it has enough performance throughput, and so that's one we just happen to know that we worked with them and made sure that it worked well, and so we know their performance is great. But I would expect it to work with some of the other docks as well, and almost any dock would work for at least one drive. It's just when you start getting multiple drives, you want to make sure your dock has the bandwidth, to doesn't slow down that bandwidth. And some of the cheaper ones might, they may.
They do. They get hot because I bought a few. They get hot to the point where you can hardly touch them and stuff. So I avoid those. Yeah. I have an OWC dock right now that we're streaming through. I have the Camlink 4K going into a dock, but you can't plug anything else into that dock when you're doing the Cam Link. If you have a hard drive plugged in, I don't know, it's drawing too much power, it'll skip and everything else. So when I'm doing the streaming, I just plug it in. It's the only thing plugged into the dock. It's a Thunderbolt dock. So do we think, I don't think there's any, when was the last time Apple came out with a new iMac Pro? It's not been that long, correct? I don't know. I'm not an iMac Pro, I'm sorry, I'm iPad Pro. The iPad Pro.
Yeah, that was last year, I believe, with the M2.
At WWDC?
I think it was at WWDC. That's usually when they've either, I honestly can't remember. One of the iPad Pros they did in fall, so that could go either way, I think, depending on how much they have to show. But they could easily put an M3 iPad Pro out and, just take it to another level there. Who knows?
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, and the other thing we talked about in one of our last streams, 2 Thunderbolt ports instead of just 1.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, I think I said that to one of the Apple reps at BEA. I said, if there's one thing that would make life just wonderful is to have the 2 ports on there, because people don't want to have to always have a dock hanging off or a bunch of cords hanging off. But particularly for things like having a mic connected or plus your drive, that would just open up a whole new world without a lot of extra hardware. And we'd love to see that.
And then, so if they had 2 docks, I mean, it's based off the same chips as the MacBook, right? And the Mac version, the same M1, M2. How come I can have 3 ports on the MacBook and can't have it on the iPad if it's the same chipset? That's what I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's both a design decision and, maybe there's some other technical issue there. I don't know. That's something I can only speculate on. But sometimes I think, it's part of Apple's design aesthetic, that is more important than, than the technical difficulties there.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, well, okay, no, don't.
Never mind.
Okay. Yeah, that one we don't talk about the Apple mouse.
Yeah. It's astounding to me. They've made so many misses on the mouse. Remember the original hockey puck mouse from the iMac that was circular? Yeah. And you didn't even know which direction it was pointing in. And then this thing has been around for how long?
I know.
Come on.
I'll say it. I always go to using a nice little. I've got this Logitech Bluetooth mouse that can hook up to 3 different devices, with the press of a button, and so I use it both on my iPad and my Mac. And
okay,
I just I can use an Apple mouse, but it's just not. That's one area where they did not do as well, and it was definitely form over function there, and that one I don't love.
I like the mouse itself. I just don't like the charging. You have to. It's like turn it upside down like a turtle. Yeah, charge it like a turtle on its back. It's just ridiculous. It's horrible. It's a horrible design. It happened during Johnny Ive, right? They didn't sneak it in after he left.
No, that was before. Yeah, it was definitely.
I was shocked. He must have had nightmares about that. So somebody overrode him on that one. So, so when you first announced third-party plugins, I know Roger Bolton had the stabilization. He still does, right?
Yes, absolutely.
What has happened in the third-party plugins world for iPads since then?
Well, that we did as a very tight integration. That's the only way to do it still at this point.
Okay.
There is no plugin architecture. And that would be an interesting thing that might come at WWDC. I don't know. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see that another year off before we see anything like that. And if that happens, that could open up some really lovely new alternatives. Right now, it does require us to do a tight integration, and for them to basically provide a framework that we can integrate in LumaFusion, except for audio plugins. Now, audio plugins are supported. Third-party audio units can be used in LumaFusion, but Apple hasn't done a video plugin architecture yet. So for now, we're working closely with some third parties to work to bring more tools and capabilities to LumaFusion that way.
So you're saying,
me though, with Final Cut coming out and everybody complaining about no plugins, it wouldn't surprise me actually.
Yeah.
Well, I have I did a top 10 reasons I'm not buying Final Cut on the iPad, and one of the reasons is I have 15. It was part of it was humor. I mean, there's people. Don't take me serious, okay? Anybody out there, whenever I say something ridiculous, don't take me serious. I'm just pulling your leg. But because I had Final Cut on the Etch-a-Sketch. That was one of the things. They didn't have, that was coming out next. But I have 1,500 plugins on my Mac version of Final Cut Pro. First off, I'm not going to buy them over again for the iPad.
Right.
And I can't use them when I edit on the iPad? No, I use a lot of them. Yeah. I use a lot of them. I use, maybe 10 to 25% of them all the time because there's some really, really good third-party plugins. So that's an issue.
What are your favorites that you use all the time?
I like quality titles, not goofy titles, not squirrely, swirl around titles and stuff, but just good quality titles. That's one of the things that I use. And I like good quality transitions because, I don't mind, nowadays a jump cut is okay. Most of the time. You can cut a few frames out and it's a little bit, quirky. That's fine. But sometimes that doesn't work and I need a transition. So once again, I want quality, something that doesn't take you out of, does what it's supposed to do is transition from one clip to the other without a bunch of swirls and turns and everything. I don't like any of that stuff. So I like quality transitions and quality titles and things. And then, now we have color corrections. The different ways you can apply it to a clip to see if you like it, and then you can take it off again. So I'm exploring some of those. You mentioned before about editing off the SSD. Tomorrow, or hopefully over the weekend, I bought a brand new camera, the Lumix S5 Mark II X. Okay. And you can record to an SSD, directly to an SSD, yes. And it records ProRes on the SSD, and it records ProRes RAW via the HDMI to an Atomos recorder. And the camera's $2,200.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It does 6K internally. It does 6K internally. But anyway, you can take the SSD, record the SSD, unplug it, and just right to LumaFusion. You don't have to worry about, transferring data.
Then you're going to want a new iPad.
Well, I know. No,
you said...
Yes.
Yes.
I am absolutely in the market for one. You just said you had a really old
iPad. Which one do you have? Does it have the USB-C?
It's an Air. It's the Air 2, iPad Air 2.
Oh. Is that USB-C?
No. It's horrible.
So you're going to
Lightning.
need a new one.
The Lightning it's ridiculous. This is another thing. We talked about the mouse. Lightning is USB 2.0 speeds.
Yeah.
It's 2.0 from the 1990s, whenever the heck, not the 1990s, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like all this time I'm spending $1,500 on a phone and you give me a Lightning port with USB 2.0 speeds. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I'll get the 15 this year and I'll trade this one in so I can, hopefully that's going to have USB-C / Thunderbolt speeds and stuff.
Yeah, I really hope next year we're plugging in those SSD drives to your phone and editing right from there. That's our goal.
That, and I want to use a pencil on this. My
there
phone.
We go. All right. It's a plan.
I know it. I've always said that because I don't need a pencil on the iPad. I need it when everything's so tiny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Chris said there's a reason why the screens are different or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does require some technology for that, for sure.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, anyway, I want what I want.
No, absolutely. Make a special pencil for the iPhone. I'd buy it, a little stylus, whatever. Oh, so that would be, Matthew says SSD to phone would be so nice. Listen, it's their SSD drives are so expensive. When I went to a 1 terabyte, it's just dramatically more money. And the same with the MacBooks, but I have to get I got the 4 terabyte, and I have to get the big drive on the MacBook because I have a lot of audio plugins and samples and stuff that take up half a terabyte by themselves. And I have to have them natively on I don't have to, but I want them natively on my MacBook. So I have to get the big one there. I'll bite the bullet because, boy, are they expensive when you get up and, past 1 terabyte. But the phone, I got it because I said, oh, I can do ProRes RAW now, but I can't get it off the phone. I mean, it just, even with AirDrop, I use an app called, what is it called? iMazing to transfer my data off. I really like that one. You can just drag and drop, and it just seems to work better, more reliably, because people use AirDrop. They select 25 clips, and it fails at some point. Right. So I say just do 6 at a time or 8 at a time if you're using AirDrop. And the other thing is, Lightning, when you connect your phone in Final Cut, it's always problematic getting media off your phones. And you would think that they'd have that worked out since the phone is Apple and Final Cut is Apple and Lightning is Apple. But I never use Final Cut to transfer the footage. It's just always problematic for me. So I just do it separately to the Finder, and then I'll take the clips and drag and drop them into Final Cut from there.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've always done well with is our project package, includes everything. So you don't have to worry about, relinking your media. It's always there. Interesting in the sidebar chat, that Justine Paula, has a couple of interesting points about both discussing with overseas users about what she sees as needs for presenting conflicts. And I think, one of the things we've done at LumaTouch is by being available, and it gets to her second point, by being available on a wider range of platforms, including now, Android and Chrome OS. That's a key part of what we're doing is because, no matter where you are, with LumaFusion, you can find a device that you can afford to do it with. I do all my testing right now on an old 9th generation iPad because we still want to make sure that it runs smoothly on that. And, once in a while, I'll find myself working on the iPad Pro and everything's like running perfectly smooth. And then suddenly Terri will remind me to say, hey, you need to retest this on an iPad. It's not running as smoothly as it used to. And so we spend a lot of time on that to make sure that we don't break that and that it will run on all the devices that are available, including inexpensive devices that people can have everywhere.
No, that's a very good point. And whenever there's a feature missing in Final Cut, people always say, oh, well, Apple has to take care of the oldest, they have to carry the oldest Macs and stuff. I understand that, but they should not hold back features from those of us that buy more current. They should just say, this is a restriction, you need this version. Just like, you can't run Final Cut on the iPad anything lower than the M1.
Right.
Same kind of thing. Oh, here another question from Matthew. Are auto captions on the list? I'm not sure what auto captions are, but captions, I guess, working with captions.
Well, I assume that's the speech-to-text captions where it'll automatically detect and build captions for you. And yes, that's on our list for sure and fairly high up in priority, including a complete subtitling workflow that would include auto captions as well.
So I have to give props to Resolve. I have Resolve Studio 18.5 beta. I love they have speech to text and they have captions in the timeline. And every time I need captions, I take everything into Resolve and do it. And it's fantastic. It works really well. There's no additional charge other than they have it's $2.99 for this. It's only in the studio version, but it works so well, so well. When I'm doing videos like today's video, I will bring it into Resolve just to get a text transcript of it. So if I go on a search at some point in the future, I have time, code, searchable text, in the text document. And I can search for whatever I want to search for and then go to the clip. And also in the timeline, you can add captions and adjust them. You can select how wide they are, whether they have a background and the whole 9 yards. So I have to give props. Not that I like Resolve anyway for a desktop app.
It's a good product, and I hope by next year we'll have you doing it in LumaFusion. So we'll see.
Absolutely. So when I was at NAB, like I said, I edited on my phone. One of the things that I couldn't find was how to flip the clip, because the front-facing camera does it backwards on the iPhone. Well, I found it today. I know where it is now. But I said, where are they hiding that? I found it. So I know how to do the flip, because some of the camera apps that I have, you have a choice of flipping that phone right from the beginning. But on the iPhone native camera app, did I use that? Or no, it was Filmic Pro Double Take, because I filmed myself and it didn't flip or something. Speaking of Final Cut on the iPad, this something else is aggravating. They brought out a quote unquote pro camera in Final Cut.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
What is this? What is this?
Yeah. Well,
$1,500 and you can't give me those features on a pro cam app for my phone?
My guess is this is a way for them to test in a lower volume, the new feature, in preparation for something in the future. I'd be very surprised not to see that, coming on the next iPhone.
Yeah, because it's available in all third-party apps.
Yeah.
All the third-party apps you buy for the phones for generations now, 12, 13, 14, they all have those controls. White balance, ISO, all your, things, they've had them so obviously you can do them on the phones. Yep. But the iPhone, as we know, audio is at least 50% of good video. And you still don't have audio controls, even audio meters on the native camera app after all these years.
Yeah, I think you'll always, I think it's another case of, you're always going to want somebody who specializes in that. So Filmic Pro, has been the leader there, and I think they'll, continue to innovate there and stay ahead. I'm sure Apple will come into the space with more pro features, but I think there'll always be opportunities for smaller developers like us and like Filmic to, provide features that people really need that Apple just isn't a priority for Apple. So, I think that's the great thing about this ecosystem.
And a nice compliment. I want to say I appreciate everybody's efforts. Keep up the great work. And I have to agree, the great work.
Thank you.
Because you guys are doing fantastic work for all these years that I've been talking to you. It's fantastic. So I'm sure you have a roadmap for the rest of 2023. I'm not sure what you can talk about or want to talk about. Besides the 16 tracks, that's huge, or however many tracks you enable.
Yeah, I don't want to promise 16. Because
no, I understand. That's what I meant.
but I think, we have not gone into silent mode like Apple is in, where they say nothing. But at the same time, we have made a mistake in the past of saying too much. And then it puts a lot of pressure on our team to hit dates over quality. And I think that's the danger of sharing, is that it can accidentally shift your priorities. And I want to keep our priorities on just quality, making sure that what we do deliver is the right thing and good enough. So.
Yeah, and I think, I can say that our focus, for this year is going to be particularly on features that people have been asking for a long time. And so, we'll leave a little mystery of what those are, but, I think people will be very happy with the number of features that come out and the progress and what features come out this year. I think we have a good range of both new things that maybe, people weren't expecting to come out, but also plenty of things that people have been asking a lot for, and we'll bring out in the usual way we do with, the best possible implementation of it we can.
Yeah,
so go ahead. Sorry.
Ahead. Oh, as I was just going to say, Multicam it took us a long time, because it's the one feature that Chris and I have ever done together where the technology met the user need in a way that was just like the most impossible to solve puzzle. So from a developer standpoint, where you put the thumbnails for the switching determines to some degree how the code works. It's not just like you place it wherever you want. The library has a function, the timeline has a function, and so on. And the things that I felt were necessary to create this new experience were not in line with what the technology and the code were telling us to do. And it just really took us a long time to kind of put those together and find a way to make it work the way we wanted it to work. And so, yeah, I think that was a unique feature that just took us a long time to do. And so now we're back on track. That's, we have some revisions to do to that, but that turned out excellent. And we're happy now, though, to be moving forward with things that are more in line where technology meets usability in a really good place. And so I'm excited for that.
Things we have a good knowledge of already. Multicam
Yes.
was a unique experience in that we were learning as we went, and we wanted to do something new. And, we had to learn a lot to do it, where most of the features we're looking at near future are pretty well at least known. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do because we're going to do them right, and we're going to make sure that it's a great implementation, but I think they're more understandable and have a more definite time frame.
Yeah.
So we have another comment. Road Capture is a great free app for recording video, even front and back. Yeah, I saw that. That's something new they had out. So I've been using the legacy version of Filmic Pro's Double Take because they initially provided it free, and they've let the updates go through. You can do 4K capture, front and back camera now with Double Take.
Oh, nice.
4K front and back simultaneously.
Oh,
And you
nice.
can record two separate files. So when I interview people, sometimes, not all the time, I want that ability to cut that, to have both my picture small so people can see me asking a question and then the main person in front. And, I really like that option. So, but 4K, both of them do
Yeah, then
4K
you can
now.
just throw those in LumaFusion and Multicam
Absolutely.
edit now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the other things that we've talked about in the past is LumaFusion has features that even Final Cut Pro on the Mac doesn't have. And I want to bring one of those up now because it's been a sticking point, a sore point for many editors. In Multicam, you have a separate audio track that doesn't cut with the video.
Right. Yeah, that was something
Final
unique.
Cut cuts the audio with the video. Even when it's not selected, it still cuts it, and a lot of times it'll create a little click going through there to this day. So that is a
Yeah.
great, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have that option to have a primary track, but we also have some other really unique options like mapping your audio. When you're syncing, you can say, oh, I want camera 1 to have camera 4's audio, or I want camera 1 to have my Zoom audio, or you can mix it up however you want so that you can cut just the audio you want, or you can have a separate primary track that doesn't get cut. So it is super powerful.
Well, I'm just saying that it's been aggravating for Final Cut Pro users that on the Mac, it still cuts the audio every time you do
Yeah.
a cut. Even if it's not selected, it still cuts it. And sometimes it creates clicks and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you a secret about the primary audio too. That it was a really difficult feature to implement, and it was one that that ended up being part of the long time that it took to develop the feature. But after it was one of those where during development, I'm like, boy, if we didn't have to do this, we could be done with Multicam right now. But when we were done, it's like, okay, we've created something unique here that really is useful, and so it was worth it. And that's how we developed.
Oh, there is a new setting too in LumaFusion that does, digital audio can get clicks when on any editing program.
right.
And we now have put in what's it called, Chris?
It's reduce pops at cut points. So
Yeah.
it does a tiny tenth of 10 millisecond fade between cuts that are different, and so it will really reduce some of the pops that you can get in there and can be really useful in a lot of projects.
That's brilliant. I mean, why doesn't Final Cut have that? So Logic, which I love, Logic Pro, has a feature, and most DAWs, digital audio workstations, have this feature, cut at zero crossing. So the only time it'll cut the audio is when it's going at a zero crossing, so there's no clicks and no pops.
Yeah.
So that Logic
Look what
has that.
you've done to Chris. He's thinking.
Yeah, I know. There's another feature for our backlog. So thanks, Richard.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm not the least bit shy about suggesting things the more I use a product. So I'll be letting you know, especially on the iPhone version. But there's two other things I want to mention that I absolutely love with LumaFusion. The ability to color code clips and projects, color code projects too?
Yes,
Or just
absolutely.
clips?
No,
Okay.
projects as well. And you can search and sort by colors as also. Yeah.
And that's fantastic. I love that. I love that ability. The fact that not only can you color code, you can search by the color blue. And all your blue clips will come up. And yellow and red or whatever other colors that you use. And you have an audio mixer.
Yes, we have an audio mixer and per track audio mixer. Yes. Yeah.
That
As
is
well as-
part of this hybrid sort of track-based editor with the magnetic timeline that I think is really LumaFusion's powerhouse, is the timeline.
Enhanced magnetic timeline.
That's what I call
Please.
it.
Enhanced magnetic timeline, because you can link and unlink things from the main timeline.
You can lock and unlock, view and unview, mix tracks, link and unlink clips or tracks. So it is, it sounds complicated when I say it like that, but actually the default state is, you normally just edit that way. And then when you want to do something special, you can say, hey, I have this tool here I can use to do this.
Now, I just did a tutorial on how to lock the secondary storyline in Final Cut Pro. I did it a few months ago because this technique I use all the time. For example, if you want to have markers, say at 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, if you're doing something, you want exact markers to stay there. Natively, you can't do that in Final Cut because the markers are clip-based. You move the clip, the marker moves with the clip.
Right.
So what I do is I put an anchor clip at the beginning of the timeline, and I anchor the secondary storyline to that anchor clip.
Right.
So it doesn't move when I edit in the primary. It's a workaround, but it's I don't have to do that in LumaFusion. It's just you can unlink something. So it's not only, what I do is I put a title, if I want to use markers, link, connect it to that anchor clip, and then I can put markers on the title, and they'll stay put.
Right.
They'll stay put. So
so one of the things I do in LumaFusion that actually, even though I should have known you could do this, but it took me a while to get my workflow, was when I cut a voiceover, I'll cut that on the main track because in insert mode, so I can get the timing and everything just right, and then I move it down to a secondary track, and then I cut in insert mode to on the main track for my video. So you can kind of use the tools in different ways than just the standard. Yeah, it works really well.
Wait a minute. You mean to tell me you have voiceover in LumaFusion?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Final Cut for iPad doesn't have that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It doesn't. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And additionally, one of the things we added in the recent release is the voice isolation filter. And interestingly, that's Apple's voice isolation filter.
Right. You told me that last time, right?
Yeah, and so that's, so if you happen to have done your voiceover in a slightly, noisy room with a fan going on, put that voice isolation filter on, and it does an amazing job.
It does.
Right there.
It absolutely does. It's a really nice feature. So something else that we've talked about in the past is I talked about Photo Joseph's red chair. He sold that.
Oh, did he?
I think he's moving.
He's moving somewhere overseas, and he
that's
sold
right.
his red
beanie or something.
And I missed my opportunity to go get that. I would have drove up there and picked it up.
Yeah, we should have gotten that. Dang it.
We should have auctioned that off. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you enjoy
our whole
NAB?
tutorials series is coming out. Carolyn Scott is now remaking the whole tutorial series. So, excuse me.
Yeah, we really enjoyed NAB. It was good to get back to it. It had been a few years, with COVID and everything, and
sure,
it was enjoyable to come back. It felt different, but in a good way. Actually, it almost felt, most of the booths were a little smaller and not quite as grand as they used to be, which was actually nice. It sort of brought it home a little bit and made it a little more personal, and I liked that a lot.
Well, they
think happened, Richard. You get points for every year that you go to NAB as an exhibitor, and the more points you get, the first choice at the booths. and
Oh, I didn't know that.
everyone lost their points during the pandemic.
Ah,
And so
okay.
the playing field was leveled. So you have like Black Magic next to these really small players because everybody had the same points. So I was kind of like, we should have went. We should have, we were there and at BEC, but we did
Yeah.
not get points for that. So I was like,
Yeah.
we should have done it.
Yeah,
Maybe next. We'll see.
absolutely. So I'm hoping, I have not heard anything, that we have a creative summit in person at Cupertino again this November.
That would be
Ooh.
nice.
Yeah, because we haven't had it in person one since 2019. You were there then because I interviewed you and filmed you. But last year they had the world tour. They just divided it up and sent it out to 10 different cities. Well, only five cities because the overseas ones never happened. So I'm thinking, this is not me saying anything out of school, but I'm thinking they're going to go back to the in-person one in Cupertino, because Cupertino is the place to be because Apple is there. The Final Cut Pro team is there. You get to go see their presentation at Apple campus. We've only been to one Infinite Loop, but we've been promised a couple times, it didn't happen, we were going to Spaceship Campus. So hopefully we get to go to the Spaceship Campus. That's what I'm hoping. And something else I didn't realize, I should have realized it, if I do go there this year when they have it, if they have it, Steve Jobs' childhood home is close by. I found it on the map. So that's someplace I definitely want to take an Uber to and just visit because I was a big fan of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
It is.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be fun to have that back in person. That's a good summit.
I'm
Yeah, and
curious,
they-
now that Final Cut for iPad is out, I'm wondering, would LumaFusion be there? I don't know. I guess it
Yes, you will. And I'll tell you why. Because Black Magic was at the last one.
Right.
Oh,
There's
okay.
still plenty of
That's true.
workflows that are all, again, it goes to our own story, which is that, and to what you said earlier is that, it's not a zero-sum game, and that, these are all tools we can use, and LumaFusion has its place as well as Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve. And I think people will find great uses for them depending on their workflow at any particular moment.
Absolutely. And also now you're also on Android and Chromebooks.
Absolutely.
So there's people that go to these things that don't have Apple phones. The people that I know a lot of people that are on Android and stuff. I'm not. That's one thing I absolutely love, the ability of these phones. I don't care about the calling. Heck with that. I want the camera. If they update the camera, the lenses, I'm in. Even though I'm hoping USB-C this year.
Yeah.
So, and I have my new Lumix S5 Mark II X. It's a B&H sitting there in their warehouse. I'm waiting for it to change to shipping. It's weird because I got two lenses. Okay, I have two prime lenses. I got the S5 II Mark II X. And I got two prime lenses. I got a 24 millimeter f1.8 and a 50 millimeter f1.8. And they sent me the 24 millimeter, but they didn't send me the camera or the other phone. They're together. I don't know why they bothered sending me the one lens. I can't use it till I get the camera.
Yeah.
But for some reason they did. So they had a special. They had a really, really good special that I jumped on and got it. So
That's cool. Well, for now, you can
lenses
just
are
put the
so
look back
expensive.
on your bookshelf there until.
Yeah, I have it down here somewhere. My lens, I got it down there. But I'm excited to get that, and then I will get the iPhone 15 Pro Max, whatever the heck that is. I'm sure it's going to have Thunderbolt / USB 4, whatever the heck that connection is. And they're talking
If it
about the
does,
Pro.
I'll definitely get that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I will get I'm definitely due for a new iPad. And the only thing I've used it besides LumaFusion, I read books at night when I go to bed, and I take my iPad there and I just read books and watch tutorials with my headphones and stuff. But now that, you guys are advanced to the point where I can edit off an SSD, that's fantastic. And I get a OWC dock and maybe use two SSDs or whatever. That's fantastic. Those are great features.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yep.
So what do you like about Final Cut on the iPad?
All right, so let's see. I should bring up my list of that. Because I do have a list. Oops, it looks like I got off my list there, but let's see if I can bring it up and give you an idea. May take me a second. Oh, okay. Things we like. Okay, I mentioned before the dial control for precise value setting with less real estate. The instant reversing I really like. They have really good titles in there, and that's something we're continuing to work on, and you'll see improved in our area as well. Let's see. Oh yeah, I like their multiple timelines per project, but it's a little hidden. And I did like the jog wheel for nudging clips. That was pretty good for that. I think you can do it just as well with our gestures in LumaFusion and with keyboard equivalents. But those were some of the nice things. And I think it has a nice new UI that is very fresh, and I think that's good. And so, but oddly enough, I don't think feature-wise there's anything in there that LumaFusion, virtually nothing in there that LumaFusion has, and LumaFusion has, I think, a lot more useful tools, video stabilization and some of the other ones you've mentioned today that I think for anybody really wanting to edit a story are probably more important, for everyday use. But not to say that Apple won't have those in the next releases. So
Right,
this is
right.
the 2.0 version, and but I was a little surprised by some of the omissions in there. That was the biggest surprise.
Yeah. There's been some of the omissions, and like you said, I expect them to catch up with their updates. And what I'm really hoping is that Final Cut for iPad boosts the development pace of Final Cut for the Mac, because you really can't. You can't just develop the iPad version and leave the Mac version back here, because the Mac version has really been stalled for the last 3 or 4 years. And I've heard all the excuses. First, I heard it was Metal 2, Metal 1, Metal 2. Then I heard Apple Silicon. Now the recent one is, they're working on the iPad version. I don't want to hear that nonsense. Everybody has to work with Metal 1, Metal 2, and Apple Silicon. Everybody has to work on their iPad version. This is not exclusive to what Apple has. So I don't want to hear the excuses why the pace is, slowed down so much. It's because it's dramatic.
Right. And they have significantly larger coffers than a small company like us. But that also, that's actually an interesting point, that a larger company, priorities change. That can really affect a development schedule. And that, I think you can see that in Final Cut Pro, is that, the focus was on getting the iPad version out, and you get all hands on deck going that way. And, but I hope you're right. Now that that's come out, there might be the option for moving feature parity forward and slowly building that together. But you never know. Depends what Apple's priorities are. And we may find out a lot about that next week at WWDC. It may be very different than what we think it is.
I'm excited. I'm excited for WWDC. Anytime there's, I'm not excited for the glasses. That's not something that I'm really interested in at this point. Okay, maybe as they develop more to the future, but I am excited about seeing what the Mac Pro is. I'm not in the market for one because it was so expensive last time, and Apple offered me $1,500 on a $9,000 machine trade-in if I got the new M2 MacBook Pro. I said that ain't going to happen. I got way more than that just selling it locally. So I don't need the Mac Pro, but I'm certainly curious to see what they do with it, because that thing was gigantic. I mean, it was a big, beautiful beast of a machine with everything was interchangeable. You could even get the power supply was modular.
Right.
So if you were talking to Apple Care and they said, well, we think it's a power supply, they can ship you a new one. You can pull the old one out, plug the new one in, and see if that's what the problem was. It's fantastic. I don't see how they're going to do that with the Apple Silicon version, because isn't the memory on the chip and stuff? You can't do memory.
Yeah, memory is the big question back there. Anything else, I think they could have, slots for things. They can have drives. They can have all those kind of things. I almost envision a tiny little 1-inch CPU, breadboard in there, and then just massive amount of slots and things could be sort of amusing. But the memory is a question, because it is one of the key advantages of that whole architecture, is that memory is integrated and unbelievably fast. It's one of the things that makes it perform well. So I don't know what they're going to do about that. That'll be interesting to see if they have an answer there.
And then, there's probably not going to be any new iPad, but the iMac has also been ignored for years. They have the M1 version, the 24-inch. They stopped making the 27 for the time being. So maybe we're going to see an M3 or an M2. I'd like to see a 27-inch. I used an iMac for years before the 2019 MacBook Pro.
Right.
So we have another comment. Is LumaFusion an actual file type if you were starting with other users? Project, recut software, AutoCut, dead space? I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
An actual file type.
Yeah, so LumaFusion, exports, when you export a project, depending on, you can do different settings, it'll export effectively, it's its own file type, but it is a zip file that contains both the project archive, which is the timeline information, and all the media. And that project archive is actually a JSON file, which for those not familiar, it's a text-based file that's very readable, very usable, and could be put into some kinds of automation workflows, where you could actually read that data and use it for other features. And then, of course, we have the FCP XML export as well for that kind of workflow. So I think there's some opportunities there for sure.
So they're saying that recut software will auto cut dead space and export to Final Cut, Resolve, and others. Wonder if they could export to LumaFusion.
Create a LF export. Potentially, we'll have to look into that. I don't know. I haven't looked at recut at all, but I'll add that to my list of things to look at.
Yeah.
I have noticed an uptick in new NLEs coming to market. Some of them are web-based and things.
Yeah.
I got plenty, okay? I got Final Cut, I got Resolve, and I got LumaFusion. That's all, and I got Logic Pro. I don't need anything else. I got plenty, but CapCut, I keep hearing about CapCut, some of the things that does. And there's other ones I keep that, on Twitter, I'll see one pop up and I'll go look at it and say, oh, that's interesting how they're doing things. I don't want to edit online. I don't want to. I want to edit in a physical device that I have complete 100% control on. I don't mind collaboration or something, or storing some things. Like for example, I have Final Cut. I have all my customized keyboards, shortcuts, Logic and Final Cut. And I keep a copy in the cloud. So if I go somewhere, I don't have to worry about, I forgot my keyboard shortcuts. No, they're in the cloud. I can download them and load them back into the application.
So Matthew is saying recut will export the Final Cut XML. So if we could import a Final Cut XML, this would...
We don't currently do that, but that's something we've considered in the past, and so we'll look into that some more. And potentially, recut could also export, directly our format if it was of interest to them. So we'll at least investigate that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of the people of your customers do you think use Final Cut, exporting to Final Cut with the XML plug app?
That's a
10,
really good
15,
question.
20%?
It's probably less than that, actually. It's probably more like 5%, maybe even a little lower. I mean, most of our users just use LumaFusion. Because of the number of users, the vast majority just use LumaFusion and export directly. But it's for these unique workflows. Like people like you. If you got to a point in LumaFusion where you had the edit, but I've got to use that one title or that one plugin on Final Cut Pro, then you have that option available to you, and it's great when you need it. But most of our users aren't finding a need for it all the time. It's once again a one-time purchase, easy to have available for you, and
right.
And we do see continuous regular sales of the Final Cut Pro export, because there are people who continually find a need for it, and it's great to have.
Yes, absolutely. We got another comment. Been a LumaFusion user for 5 years, not leaving, love it. Absolutely. I'm going to be doing a tutorial, just so you know, LumaFusion versus, not versus,
right.
Benefits of using LumaFusion versus other iPad NLEs, because, listen, you have link and unlink, and you have this, the magnetic timeline. Something I've noticed today in one of the tutorials, you have a help menu you can turn on that anything you click on has the help little icons, little bubbles.
Yeah, you just press and hold on the help button, and it will pop up tooltips there as well. And then we both have as you've seen, lots of video tutorials. We also have a complete reference guide online. So we give all the options for different ways people like to learn software.
And I'm going to mention two more things. I can't stop mentioning. I got a list of like 25. Stabilization.
Yep.
Final Cut for iPad does not have that. And I'm kind of surprised because that's Roger Bolton, right?
Well, yeah, but and Apple has their own built-in one on Final Cut Pro on the desktop, which I don't know
Right.
why they have. But I think, but frankly, lock and load even on desktop is better than Apple's built-in one, and so I think we
Right.
have the best one. By having CoreMelt's lock and load, we have the best one built into LumaFusion, and that's great.
And something else that Final Cut on the desktop doesn't have, audio ducking.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Soundtrack, I thought Soundtrack Pro had that years ago, but still, we don't have that on the desktop. We certainly don't have it on the iPad version.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's an extremely useful feature, of course. Yeah.
So you said that you do not have, there's no third-party plugins yet that you
Yeah,
can
not
buy
for video.
separately,
Yeah.
like
No, you can't.
Storyblocks?
Not for
That's
video.
just- Yeah, not for video. Now there's content. Storyblocks is content, and there is content that's available. We are also having, we are working with some other people to develop additional LumaFusion specific content, new titles, new transitions, and things like that. And so there will be more available, but we have to integrate it in the app. We can't make it where they can some of these things like titles can be sold separately because you can just download them, but we're also going to be integrating new ones within the app as well.
Yeah, so I look forward to at some point, I'm not doing it today, buying it'll be an iPad Pro. If they do a 14-inch or they have 2 Thunderbolt ports, that'll get me to jump, even though it's going to cost $2,000, I know. At some point, I'll get that. And at that point, I'll get the free trial for Final Cut and try it out for a month. The one good thing about the subscription that they have is you can stop it. You don't have to have it. I would never get it for the year because I'm not going to use it that much. But at some point, yeah, I will try it out. But it has so many things. I mean, listen, the main thing is the scrolling timeline. That's a big deal for me. It has been since the classic version of Final Cut. The fact that they don't have it still is amazing to me. It's flabbergasting to me that they don't have that still. That's one of the biggest drawbacks why I would not continue to use it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we will certainly always listen to our customers, to provide the best possible way of presenting our timeline, and I think we'll continue to do that.
So everybody has a scrolling timeline. Everybody, except for Final Cut. Avid has it. Premiere has it. DaVinci Resolve has it on the cut page. It's interesting. They don't have it on the edit page. They have a cut page. You guys have it. All the DAWs have it.
Even
Logic.
Even Apple iMovie has it. Yeah.
Well, Logic has 2.
Yeah.
Logic, you can do 2 separate zoom levels of a scrolling timeline. Mm-hmm. So you can have a zoomed in one and a zoomed out one. Motion has one.
Yeah.
Motion has one. Pro Tools has one. Everybody has that. For some reason, it's funny because years ago, when I've had this list, the top 100 list of things I want to see in Final Cut since version Final Cut 4, Classic 4 or 5. And the scrolling timeline's always been on that list. And so when 10 came out, I also kept it on the list there. And I got an email one time, and I'm not going to say who it's from, but they said they're not doing a scrolling timeline now just for spite. Now, I'm not saying that's real. I thought that was funny because I made such a big deal out of it. So I'm just saying that's just a little sidebar there. But no, I would not use it because of that issue. I look at my audio waveforms all the time, and I edit with those, and I want to see where the playhead is going to cut. I want to see what's going on. You don't have to stare at the timeline, but I want to know where the playhead is, not over here off the screen somewhere. So without telling us, your customers, what it is, do you have some updates coming out for the rest of 2023?
Absolutely. We'll have
Planned?
an update coming out relatively soon that'll have some nice new features in it. And then we've got I don't know exactly when they'll hit, but
Sure.
I would expect some significant releases before the end of the year with some major.
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
We have talked about the keyframing, advanced keyframing, where you can do curves and speed ramp. Not speed ramping, but on your keyframes, you can
Yes.
change the speed between keyframes and then change the curve between keyframes.
Yes.
So that's coming
That works
this
right
year,
now.
I would say.
Oh, good. Good. Those are
That's certainly an intention. Yeah.
that's good. That's
I was better than
fantastic.
Terry this time about not saying it.
Yeah, but I've already said that one enough
Yeah,
times
no,
that
I
I
know.
shouldn't hold
True.
it back from Richard. So-
Yeah, exactly. Oh, one of the other things I found out is you can have in LumaFusion, you can have 3 color scopes open at once.
Yes, that's another big difference. Not only that, you can arrange your color scopes any way you want. That was one of the things the engineer who worked on that, Andrew, he was happy to see that because he put a lot of time into it. We used some of Apple's newest UI techniques, Swift UI, to develop some of that. And it's an unbelievably flexible way of putting up your scopes, because you can pick each scope, you can decide how it's arranged, whether it takes 2/3 of the area or 1/3. And then within each scope, you have a whole set of parameters that you can adjust. And so you could even have 2 vector scopes with different parameters on it, and arrange it any way you want. Again, it's that flexibility that we give the users.
It's a great flexibility. I don't think I've ever used scopes, one scope. I always have at least 2 or 3 open
Yeah.
on Final
Yeah,
Cut for the desktop.
Yeah, you always want to see a couple of different views
Yeah.
of that information so that you can get your color correction correct. Yeah.
Absolutely. So have we covered everything? Everything, all my notes are covered.
It sounds like it. We've done a lot here, and it's always fun to
Yeah.
talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I did notice a couple people in the chat saying they would like a code, and there was Soul Reaver and Alexander Moraes. Don't know if I'm
Okay.
saying that right, but yeah, I'll send codes for them and FCP export for Matthew.
Very good. Now, the listeners that won just now, thanks to LumaFusion, you have to contact me.
Right.
It's not going to magically go from this video and you're going to get it. You have to contact me on Twitter. Go to my, I have multiple websites, fcpradio.com, Richard Taylor TV, Twitter, YouTube. Just do the YouTube chat. You can make a comment after this video is over and send me your email address. Otherwise, you're not going to get it because it's not going to magically appear in the App Store for you.
Excellent. All right.
Let's see. And one thing I wanted to mention was Storyblocks integration, because we had spent a lot of effort making Storyblocks, and bbuff has mentioned that Storyblocks integration is much cheaper through LumaFusion, and that is absolutely true. This is the fastest, cheapest way to get extra media into your timeline. So in Storyblocks is music, sound effects, backgrounds, and videos, and at a fraction of a cost that you would pay Storyblocks on their website. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention.
That's some tough negotiation you've done there with Storyblocks.
They are a really good company. So we'd be
Yeah.
happy to-
You know what's great is if you subscribe. Is it only a yearly, only monthly? How does that work?
You
for
can
them?
do either. You can do monthly or yearly. So, if you, like I said, if you had 1 month where you have a project where you're going to need a lot of media, do a 1 month subscription for $7 and then cancel it at the end of that month and get it again when you need it. Or if it's something you're going to use regularly, then do the yearly subscription is a little better deal, overall. But, because some people just always, are always doing projects and always need additional media. So
No,
yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So one of the places that I use, I get audio from is Audio Design Desk. I know you know those guys,
yeah.
and they have fantastic. They every Friday they come up with new Foley effects, new this, new that, and I've never had an issue. They have complete songs, instrumental songs too. So I never had a problem using their stuff, getting strikes on YouTube because of, whatever, the music, you got it from a place you shouldn't have got it from. I've been questioned, this is the truth, I've been questioned on one of my music tracks that I wrote and recorded.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I protested. I said, this is nonsense. Here's my copyright. I wrote and recorded this song. And whoever's saying that, is nonsense.
Yeah,
So one thing, like if you export right from LumaFusion, then your project will be your channel will be whitelisted. Well, allow listed for so that you won't get copyright. But you have to export directly from LumaFusion.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, we have an API with Storyblocks that we can tell them what your YouTube channel is, so they can watch for a strike and immediately, automatically, do it. Because you're right, strikes happen no matter what the music is, because most of these companies that are looking for strikes have automated bots that simply look at basically a waveform and say, "Oh, this looks close," and I'm gonna put a strike against it, because half the time they'll win it, and it's to their advantage just to overcompensate. And but Storyblocks has done a really good job of giving us the tools to help mitigate that. And if there's ever a case where the automatic copyright strike handling doesn't work, there's a form right in LumaFusion where you can select the clip that was having a problem, go up to our info panel and say, submit a claim, that there was a claim against it, and you put in the information, and Storyblocks will work extremely hard to resolve that within a very short time.
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. That's always been an issue. I mean, I'm always cautious about that. I try to use only my original music that I wrote. Right. If it had lyrics, I'll take the lyrics out and just do the instrumental version. The intro music for this live stream was something that I wrote it, and that was my band performance. So hopefully, I haven't got any recent strikes. But even if you get a strike, sometimes it's just that you can't monetize it, something like that. So that's all.
Nice music that you're doing. I like that intro music.
Oh, look, my amp. Where's my amp? Over here. I just got this thing. I love this thing. This is a battery-powered positive grid. It's fantastic. It has so many features.
Tiny.
Wow.
It's tiny, but it's very, very loud. And it has an iPad companion app. You can choose the amps you use. You can choose different pedals and different categories. It also has two Bluetooth connections. You can play music through it, and the Bluetooth connection to control it.
Wow.
Two separate ones.
Nice.
So you can play a backing track and jam along with it.
Wow.
It'll recognize you can actually go and just play some chords, and it'll put up a backing track for you of drums and bass. It's all kinds of neat features. It was on sale. I said, I got to get it, and I really, really, really like it. And it's battery. I can take it out in the backyard and play it. It's just phenomenal.
Nice.
But,
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How long does the battery last on that?
8 hours, they say.
Wow.
8 hours. And it's rechargeable USB-C and stuff. And it's also an audio interface, but yeah. Yep,
Very cool.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both, of course, for coming back on. And when you ever get an announcement, you just let me know, and we'll get you back on. We always have fun on these. And the listeners always appreciate it as well, of course.
We appreciate you and appreciate them. It's great.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
well, I'm looking forward to
those codes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'll get you the emails. I mean, once I get the emails, I'll let you know.
Perfect.
Okay.
Fantastic. Right. Great. Looking forward to WWDC and the rest of 2023. And remember, you can use Final Cut on the iPad and LumaFusion. You don't have to use one or the other. People think, oh, I'm going to stop using this. And, well, you don't want to use Final Cut because it costs you $4.99 a month. If you're not using it, you want to cancel that for sure. How many times I've got Apple TV and I get the subscription and I forget to cancel and it renews. But they do have great content. But now I cancel as soon as the first of the month goes by. I cancel it so it'll cancel at the end of the month automatically. Because it's easy. That's one thing about the iPhone. They have all your subscriptions right here. You can cancel, see when the expiration dates are, and all that stuff. So that is one really good thing about that.
Have made it easy. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And we got another.
Actually, we've actually added the ability to cancel Storyblocks right in our app, so that you don't even have to go there.
Yeah.
So
Wow. And we got another couple comments. Thank you guys all the way from Los Angeles. That's not too far from you. You're in Washington?
I'm in Washington, and Chris is in Salt Lake.
Okay. And Justine says, thanks for a brilliant app. Justine actually won a copy of LumaFusion on one of the other
Oh, great. Thanks, Jeff.
times we were here. So looking forward to the rest of 2023, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Absolutely.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.